On August 19, 1944, at the Wehrmacht headquarters in East Prussia, General Oberst Alfred Jodl examined the most recent updates on the crumbling Western Front. His team had performed the computations regarding the Allied supply chains, which extended more than 400 miles from the Normandy shores to the vanguard of Patton's Third Army. The U.S. forces had surpassed their own support capabilities. Patton's troops would come to a standstill in mere days or even hours. Without adequate fuel, no military unit could maintain such rapid progress. Operating from Hitler's Wolfschanze base, Jodl assessed insights that every experienced German commander recognized all too well. An armored division demanded 150,000 gallons of fuel each day during an offensive push. At that moment, the Americans sat 400 miles distant from their storage facilities. The outcome was unavoidable. Patton's Third Army would soon falter, allowing the Wehrmacht an opportunity to reorganize along the Seine, potentially defending the line through the winter season. Unbeknownst to Jodl, however, just 125 miles distant, a massive fleet of 558 trucks was surging eastward in a continuous stream, lights glaring in open violation of standard blackout protocols, delivering 12,500 tons of material around the clock. This bold initiative, the Red Ball Express, represented a supply effort so daring that no German strategist could have imagined its feasibility, and it was set to dismantle every preconception of mechanized combat. In less than 72 hours, Patton's tanks, presumed stalled, would smash through defenses at the Seine. A week later, they would free Paris. By month's end, they would reach the German frontier. The Wehrmacht's top tacticians were on the verge of learning a profound truth about U.S. logistics, one that would reshape their grasp of contemporary conflict. This education arrived courtesy of 23,000 drivers, 3/4 of whom were African American, transforming a unidirectional road network into the swiftest supply corridor ever devised for warfare. The German High Command's faith in the Americans' impending logistical breakdown drew from years of hard-won knowledge and fresh assessments. The Wehrmacht had invented blitzkrieg tactics, transformed the integration of infantry and armor, and grasped deeply the constraints imposed by extended supply routes. Their prior operations had often bogged down when rearward support couldn't align with frontline victories. During the Russian campaign, the Wehrmacht's momentum had crumbled not first from Red Army opposition, but from the basic challenge of provisioning troops over immense expanses. German vehicles faltered on the rugged terrain. Horse-pulled carts, accounting for 80% of their transport, failed to keep up with panzer thrusts. Mismatched rail widths caused stockpiles to accumulate far behind the lines. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich von Wiedinghoff, slated to lead the 47th Panzer Corps starting in September 1944, had observed in July, "The Americans confront the identical supply nightmare we encountered in Russia. Their reliance on machinery shifts from strength to weakness. Vehicles demand gasoline, shells, and repairs. They've pushed 400 miles in 30 days. Past precedents reveal the inevitable: stagnation." Wehrmacht analysts closely monitored U.S. usage patterns. One Sherman tank guzzled 0.5 miles per gallon on paved routes, performing even poorer off-road. An infantry division consumed 700 tons of goods per day. For an armored outfit, that figure rose to 1,000 tons. Patton directed 12 divisions across a 60-mile sector. The figures appeared beyond dispute. A need for 12,000 tons daily, hauled 400 miles inland from the coast along ruined paths amid an infrastructure the Germans had deliberately wrecked in withdrawal. General Lieutenant Siegfried Westphal, soon to serve as Chief of Staff under Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt come September, determined on August 20th that even supposing the Americans had boundless vehicles, which they lacked, flawless roadways, which didn't exist, and zero breakdowns, which defied reality, they could still only prop up Patton's momentum for another 48 hours at best. The principles of physics remain unbreakable, irrespective of American manufacturing prowess. At 2:00 p.m. on August 25, 1944, inside a commandeered French castle close to Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Lucien K. Truscott of the Motor Transport Service addressed a gathering of dubious commanders. The data he shared painted a grim picture. Patton's Third Army was devouring resources at a pace unmatched in military annals, surging ahead with velocities that overwhelmed conventional planning. Standard approaches, rail shipments, timed hauls, centralized depots had buckled beneath the pressure. "Gentlemen," Truscott declared, "we're establishing a dedicated express route from Cherbourg and the beaches straight to the combat zone. Each truck will operate for 20 hours daily. Halts only for refueling or crises. Our goal: at least 12,500 tons moved every day." The moniker borrowed from rail jargon, where a red ball denoted an urgent top-priority cargo overriding all else. The Red Ball Express would follow suit. Total precedence, zero interruptions, no deviations. Its operational details challenged every tenet of German strategy. Twin dedicated lanes running in opposite directions, one outbound with full loads to the front, the other inbound with empties. Non-stop service day and night, headlights fully illuminated, discarding all blackout restrictions. No halting policy unless for refueling or breakdowns. Convoys spaced 5 minutes apart, holding a steady 35 mph pace. Support crews for repairs positioned every 50 miles. Military police stations pulled over any rig dropping under 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, who led the forward unit in ADSEC's Advanced Communications Area, examined the forecasts. It demanded 140 trucking outfits, at least 5,958 rigs, running at 90% readiness. No supply manual in existence deemed that feasible. Still, in just 36 hours, the feat sprang to life. On August 26, 1944, operators from the 39th or 16th Quartermaster Trucking Battalion hopped into their GMC CCKW2 1-2-ton haulers, known as Deuce and a Half, packed with 105 mm shells, heading to Patton'S artillery at Mâcon, 300 miles eastward. The makeup of the Red Ball Express crew would have shocked Nazi ideologues on race. Out of the 23,000 haulers who eventually manned the line, roughly 75% were black troops in an army still divided by color. These soldiers, barred from white diners or restrooms across much of the U.S., powered the famed white-led command's advance. The haulers forged their own vibe in no time. They splashed mottos on their rigs: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, "We're on our way," Detroit to Berlin line. They set their own road codes. Laggards veered aside right away. Breakdowns got shoved to the shoulder. Anything under 20 mph counted as an obstacle. By August 28th, Nazi scouts started noting something wild. Teams from the 116th Panzer near Alençon signaled from spots eyeing the key Red Ball path. Endless stream of rigs, lights stretching 20 kilometers, no gaps, no dime-outs, roughly 1,000 per hour. U.S. forces have ditched standard caution. This broke every rule in German tactical guides. Nighttime beams drew bombers. Packed lines made ideal barrage zones. Tight spacing meant one stalled unit could freeze a whole fleet, but the Yanks acted like it was nothing. General Heinrich Eberbach, heading the 5th Panzer Army, watched the Red Ball firsthand from hidden vantage points on August 30th. His dispatch to Army Group B showed rising worry. "Foe runs a logistics setup we can't grasp. Rigs roll by every 30 seconds, around the clock, non-stop. No cover, no spread out, no tactics we know. This isn't warcraft, it's factory output turned to battle." What the Nazis failed to see was that U.S. supply chains worked on wholly separate ideas. Germans stressed hiding. Americans bet on sheer bulk. Germans hoarded equipment. Yanks figured 20% downtime and built-in buffers. Germans stuck to rigid protocols. Americans adapted on the fly. The Red Ball's output shattered enemy estimates of supply limits. Opening week, August 25-31, 1944, 89,939 tons shipped. Daily mean, 12,048 tons. Full loop, 686 miles. Fleet cycles, 5,958 trucks doing 1.5 runs each day. Gas burned by the effort, 300,000 gallons. Captured U.S. papers gave German experts these figures, which they waved off as hype. Yet the stats held true, and they ramped up fast. By September 5th, the Red Ball had hit a groove that baffled Wehrmacht planners, who still used horse carts for 80% of hauls. Fleets launched every 5 minutes from the start point out west. Typical group, 67 vehicles. Standard payload, 5 tons per rig, often pushed to 7. One-way haul of 350 miles, 14 hours on average. Flip time at terminals, 2 hours. Rigs always rolling, 5,000 underway at once. The Red Ball sparked fixes non-stop as crews tackled issues German experts saw as unbeatable. Daily failures hit about 1-800 trucks. Roadside teams handled on-site mends. Techs set up a quick sort method, 15 minutes to patch or ditch it. They scavenged components from total losses. Swaps for motors took 45 minutes with portable lifts. When the main Red Ball path jammed, haulers blazed side routes. They seized French coaches to shift troops and clear trucks for loads. They nabbed enemy autos, slapped on U.S. paint, and threw them to work. They rigged detours past wrecked spans, packing blast debris as filler. The Germans, eyeing this seeming mess that somehow clicked, just didn't get it. Their supply rules pushed meticulous prep, upkeep timetables, and set steps. The Yanks trashed every guideline, yet instead of crumbling, the Allied logistics network surged forward with remarkable efficiency. What astonished German analysts the most was the U.S. approach to fuel distribution. The Red Ball Express alone guzzled 300,000 gallons of petrol each day simply to keep itself rolling, surpassing the total allocations for numerous Wehrmacht units across all their needs. Remarkably, shortages never materialized. The Americans had engineered another extraordinary feat, Operation Pluto, which involved submarine pipelines stretching beneath the sea to deliver fuel directly across the English Channel. Come September 1944, petroleum was surging through these submerged conduits, a development that evaded German spies entirely. Along the Red Ball path, depots stocked with fuel appeared at intervals of just 25 miles. Tanker convoys operated their own synchronized routes, guaranteeing that no truck idled longer than 10 minutes before topping off. Major General Walter Wemyss, scrutinizing photos from reconnaissance flights, remarked in disbelief, "The enemy maintains fuel reserves bigger than our whole national stockpiles. They expend more petrol transporting fuel than we devote to full panzer divisions. This defies the very essence of combat as we know it. It's more like an industrial deluge." The Red Ball Express didn't merely sustain troop movements, it amplified their momentum dramatically. Traditional German strategy estimated that a mechanized unit might push 20 to 30 miles per day in ideal circumstances. Yet divisions under Patton, bolstered by the Red Ball's deliveries, consistently covered 40 to 60 miles daily over extended periods. On September 1, 1944, for instance, the 4th Armored Division surged 35 miles during morning maneuvers, paused midday for replenishment, found Red Ball vehicles already on site with petrol and shells, then pressed on for another 32 miles that afternoon. That 67-mile daily leap demolished German fortifications, which had been designed around an expected cap of 30 miles per day. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, poring over dispatches from his East Prussian headquarters, at first dismissed the intelligence as implausible. "No mechanized outfit advances 60 miles a day for an entire week," he insisted. "Breakdowns alone make it impossible. This must be Allied exaggeration or faulty sightings." Radio intercepts from American channels soon validated the accounts, however. Even more unnerving for Wehrmacht leaders, the U.S. forces transmitted their coordinates in plain language, sans encryption, utterly assured in their superior pace, outstripping any German counter. By September 5, 1944, German spies had assembled detailed dossiers on the Red Ball Express, exposing flaws in every preconception of U.S. prowess that demanded overhaul. The findings challenged core tenets of German warfare doctrine. American troops discarded vehicles recklessly, leaving wrecked ones behind instead of fixing them. Operators pushed themselves with amphetamines for days on end, flouting all standards of troop welfare. Camouflage was non-existent, leaving the operation exposed to potential airstrikes that miraculously never materialized. Breakdowns hit 30% per day, but vast backups absorbed the losses. Fuel usage alone would cripple any Continental force financially. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction underscored mounting panic. Should these accounts hold true, we're not up against a better-equipped foe, but a more advanced society altogether. They conceal nothing because they hold no dread of us. Resources get squandered since supplies seem boundless. Conventional strategies won't prevail here. Unseen by distant German eyes, the Red Ball's haulers endured brutal tolls. Men drove non-stop for 72 hours, delirious from fatigue and benzodrine. Crashes claimed 300 lives over the system's run, trucks smashing and missed, flipping on rutted paths, erupting when hot motors sparked fires. Still, spirits soared. Largely black Americans, barred from full equality back home, grasped the historic weight of their efforts. With each kilometer traversed and load unloaded, they debunked Nazi racial myths. Captive Wehrmacht officers offered vivid accounts of the system's shattering effect. Oberst Hans von Luck, seized in September 1944, confided to his questioners, "We realized defeat when your logistics clicked into focus. You ignore all norms, squandering petrol, ditching rigs, draining crews, yet triumph via overwhelming scale. You've transformed battle into something our minds can't grasp." The mental strain on German ranks proved crushing. Wehrmacht troops lay awake to the ceaseless rumble of U.S. lorries night after night, unrelenting engines, inexhaustible cargoes. They scraped by with 3 bullets apiece as Americans hauled millions. The noise alone waged a subtle terror. Even the trucks themselves awed captured German technicians. The GMC CCKW2, 1 2-ton model, the Red Ball's core workhorse, embodied assembly line mastery. General Motors churned out over 500,000 by 1945's close, outnumbering every wheeled vehicle in the entire German arsenal. Innovations. The Wehrmacht overlooked included standard all-wheel traction, self-regulating tire pressure, submersion proofing for 30-inch depths, power plants tolerant of subpar gasoline sans tweaks, and reliable cabin warmers for cold snaps. More astonishing, the hallmark of American logistics during the war embodied a replace rather than repair mindset. While Germans meticulously overhauled engines, U.S. forces simply swapped them out. In contrast to German frugality with spare components, Americans scrapped whole vehicles over trivial issues. Rather than relying on elite master technicians, the U.S. employed vast numbers of skilled workers capable of handling most fixes. As the battle lines shifted eastward, the Red Ball Express evolved with a velocity that left German logistics experts reeling. They were used to months-long setups for big supply shifts. Once the initial path to Chartres proved inadequate, Americans launched extensions to the Red Ball Express in a flash. The White Ball Express stretched from Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond linked Cherbourg to key railroad hubs, Red Lion connected Bayeux to Brussels. Then came the ABC route, tying Antwerp, Brussels, and Charleroi. Every fresh corridor sprang to life within 2 days of initial planning. By comparison, German commanders needed weeks to orchestrate comparable efforts. The Americans just slapped on fresh route signs, dispatched haulers, and got the wheels turning. The heavy reliance on African-American truckers in the Red Ball Express sowed confusion among Nazi racial ideologues. Hitler's doctrine branded black people as subpar, unfit for complex jobs, devoid of drive. But these operators were pulling off supply feats that outshone anything the Wehrmacht achieved. The black troops grasped the bitter humor in it all. Aware of Nazi disdain, they pushed their rigs even fiercer. Each kilometer they logged debunked Hitler's lies. They battled prejudice behind the wheel, dismantling fascist dogma through unmatched efficiency. Certain German captives, compelled to help load Red Ball rigs as forced labor, saw their beliefs crumble while collaborating with black non-coms who figured load balances quicker than Wehrmacht specialists, and these sergeants even spoke clearer English than some German POW camp teachers, all while showing decency to prisoners in defiance of the venomous racial myths peddled by Nazi mouthpieces. The Red Ball Express demanded setups that Germans viewed as unfeasible amid active fighting. U.S. builders erected or shored up 40 bridges, set up 15 key fuel storage sites, rolled out 26 repair outposts, and threw together 8 makeshift driver camps. And they did it all as the convoys kept flowing. German sappers had blown the span at Monte expressly to choke American supply lines. The Wehrmacht figured rebuilding would take at least 6 weeks. Yet American crews threw up a provisional crossing in just 14 hours, as Red Ball columns rerouted a mere 8 miles over rough paths scraped out by bulldozers in a hurry. Wehrmacht observers watched U.S. building techniques in disbelief. No strategy sessions, no elaborate schematics, just swift execution. They erected structures quicker than Germans could wreck them, conjuring vital networks out of nowhere across French countryside. One Red Ball Express feat that floored German gun crews was the sheer volume of shells delivered, surpassing even their wildest estimates. Allied cannonades raged unchecked, a freedom no Axis battery had tasted since '42. In the push to crack Metz's defenses that September of 1944, the Corps-level barrage unleashed 100,000 shells over a single day. The Red Ball Express funneled in every shell, plus a 20% buffer. The German pieces holding Metz got doled out just 50 shots per barrel daily. The gap was crushing. U.S. barrages thundered non-stop for stretches, while German spotters reckoned such salvos would demand 50 full truck hauls of munitions hourly. The Red Ball kept it coming relentlessly. The Red Ball Express burned through equipment at a clip that would cripple any other army. Come late September, breakdown losses hit absurd levels. Typical rig lifespan dropped to 10,000 miles from the standard 30,000. Daily outage percentage climbed to 30% fleet-wide. Power plants got swapped out 500 apiece each week. Rubber devoured 10,000 units weekly. Overall, more than 5,000 trucks wound up wrecked or ditched. Still, momentum never flagged. U.S. factories had baked in those casualties. Freighters docked every 7 days at French harbors, unloading fleets of fresh haulers. New operators got crash courses in 2 days before diving into the lines. German math revealed Americans junking more vehicles per week than the entire Wehrmacht had operating in France. Yet their hauling power only grew, never shrank. They'd pulled off the unattainable in German eyes, supply chains outpacing the wear and tear. Folks in France bordering the Red Ball paths beheld U.S. plenty that flew in the face of the lean years under Nazi grip. The morale boost for locals under occupation hit hard and fast. Red Ball operators, especially the African Americans, frequently handed out their own chow to French locals, bucking orders. At every halt, kids flocked over and drivers passed out treats like chocolate, smokes, and suds. It stood in sharp relief to the tight-fisted German rule. What Americans tossed out freely, the occupiers had hoarded grimly. Nazi spies flagged the morale blowback in reports. Now French holdouts figured a U.S. win was a sure thing. They pointed to the endless truck streams. Evidence of this came through increased sabotage. Sabotage efforts surged by 400% on the Red Bull paths. Those who once tolerated our takeover now fiercely resist it. During the first half of September 1944, the Red Ball Express encountered its toughest test yet. Patton'S Third Army pushed ahead so rapidly that the supply chain could barely keep pace. The full journey back and forth stretched beyond 700 miles. Operators were breaking down from exhaustion, trucks falling apart under the strain, and German spies picked up on the mounting pressure. On September 8th, General Panzertrooper Hasse von Manteuffel noted in his dispatch, "American logistics networks are starting to crumble. The gaps between convoys have widened from 5 to 15 minutes. Speeds on the roads have dropped off. This moment offers us a chance to strike." Yet once more, the U.S. flexibility caught the Germans off guard. In just 72 hours, the Red Ball Express revamped its setup, introducing relay stations along the way to shorten hauls to 350 miles each, rolling out shifts for drivers, setting up repair depots closer to the front, and boosting the fleet size by twofold. Come September 12th, the amount of cargo moved had risen even higher. What was meant to be a breaking point for Patton instead fortified the entire network. In addition to the Red Ball Express, U.S. forces rolled out another supply method that the Germans viewed as unfeasible: massive airdrops. C-47 cargo planes started flying essential goods right to frontline troops. Each plane hauled 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht spotters tallied 900 such missions in one day, airlifting 2,700 tons total. At its height, the Luftwaffe had only managed 300 tons per day to Stalingrad and saw that as pushing the limits. The Americans treated their cargo planes like mobile haulers, free from worries over escorts or scarce fuel. They factored in some losses and countered with sheer volume. The Wehrmacht simply couldn't keep up with this kind of industrial math. The Red Ball Express ran on leadership approaches that flouted the strict German chain of command. Lower-ranking officers handled choices that Wehrmacht generals would oversee. Noncoms directed efforts bigger than those run by German field-grade officers. Such flexibility left German analysts perplexed. U.S. supply operations seemed to lack any clear top-down oversight. Every lieutenant behaved as if he were a full general, every sergeant as a colonel. Disorder ought to have ensued, but they pulled off remarkable coordination. The Wehrmacht's stiff structure couldn't rival it. Come October 1944, as rail networks extended forward, the demand for the Red Ball Express began to ease. The effort, planned for just 10 days, stretched on for 82 days, shuttling 412,000 tons across 122 million ton-miles. German leaders, now defending their homeland, pondered the spectacle they'd observed. Field Marshal Model stated in his last assessment, "Our main downfall wasn't American armor or aircraft. It was their trucks that undid us." The Red Ball Express demonstrated that in contemporary conflict, supply chains define the strategy. Shifting to railroads proved equally impressive. U.S. rail specialists rebuilt 1,000 miles of wrecked French tracks, even as the Red Ball kept rolling. They restored lines quicker than the Germans had wrecked them, frequently repurposing seized enemy gear. The ultimate tallies for the Red Ball Express shattered every German estimate of supply feasibility. It lasted 82 days, moved 412 of 193 tons of goods, covered 222 million ton-miles, averaged 5,958 vehicles with a high of 7,000, involved 23,000 drivers overall, burned 700,000 gallons of gas each day, supplied 40,000 tons of ammo to Patton by itself, carted 15 million meals, and delivered 135,000 tons of medical gear. When German captives pored over these numbers, they confessed to basing their projections on old European standards. They'd tripled their own top outputs and figured that capped U.S. potential. In truth, they missed the mark by tenfold. More than the raw volume and mileage, the Red Ball Express wrought a deeper change. It shattered the Germans' confidence in their doctrinal edge. Wehrmacht personnel who once scoffed at Americans as pampered and machine-reliant saw those troops pull off supply wonders via grit and manufacturing might. Captured Germans at POW camps would linger by the wire, tallying the Red Ball rigs as they rumbled past. Some shed tears. The implications hit home, not merely that the U.S. could sustain its forces, but that they could squander resources on a scale beyond German output. They witnessed their entire outlook crumbling, vehicle by vehicle. The Red Ball Express also sparked an unforeseen internal debate on race within the U.S. armed forces. Its triumphs relied heavily on African American troops who remained segregated, shortchanged on rights, and excluded from frontline duty. In September 1944, General Eisenhower inspected Red Ball sites and confronted the irony up close. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, jotted down, "The general observed black drivers who'd been driving non-stop for 20 hours. He remarked, 'These soldiers are securing victory as much as any foot soldier.' We know the achievements prompted a re-evaluation of numerous assumptions. This triumph generated demands for unity that played a key role in the armed forces' racial integration. 3 years afterward, black troops had demonstrated in Europe what they had long recognized. Provided with proper equipment and chances, they could equal any competitor. The Red Ball Express served as their battlefield, and they dominated it thoroughly. Nazi ideologues on race grappled with the inconsistency. Publications from SS Racial Research just ceased referencing U.S. supply efforts. The proof was far too compelling to reject, yet too harmful to admit. After the conflict, German engineering experts examined Red Ball Express activities in depth. Their findings transformed global approaches to supply management. Sheer quantity counters waste. Backup machinery removes weak points. Distributed operations boost velocity. Uniform processes amplify effectiveness. People's stamina has boundaries, but those limits exceed expectations. In 1950, General Franz Halder, once head of the German High Command, noted, "The Red Ball Express showed that supply chains dictate tactics rather than the reverse." The U.S. grasped this principle. We discovered it far too late. Within the 23,000 drivers of the Red Ball, Tales of bravery surfaced that baffled Germans under their rigid command structure. These documented incidents came from official Army files. Corporal John L. Houston operated non-stop for 48 hours, transporting munitions to the 2nd Armored Division at Camry, nodding off at the wheel on 3 occasions, yet pressing on after colleagues roused him. Private Booker T. Washington's vehicle ignited from brake, overheating en route with medical goods. Rather than ditching it per protocol, he maneuvered the flaming rig 2 miles to a field hospital, leaping clear as fire, licked the cab. The cargo preserved lives of injured fighters from both sides. Such narratives, repeated countless times, exposed to watching Germans the essence of U.S. armed ethos: personal drive, deliberate gambles, and priority on task completion above strict rules. In a frantic bid, German units sought to mimic the Red Ball Express toward the end of 1944. During the Battle of the Bulge, Operation Greif envisioned using seized U.S. trucks for German resupply routes. The initiative collapsed right away. German operators failed to hit American paces. Their technicians couldn't fix U.S. gear swiftly enough. Fuel reserves couldn't match the usage levels. At its core, Germans couldn't emulate the U.S. mindset of boundless assets. The operations leader, Obstoni, stated, "We seized 50 American trucks. In 1 week, 30 sat idle. Americans would have swapped them out. We attempted fixes instead. That gap accounts for our loss." The harsh winter from 1944 to 1945 posed the Red Ball Express's greatest challenge. Icy downpours, drifts, and frost ought to have halted road-based movement. German guidelines claimed wheeled supply lines failed below 10° C. Still, the Red Ball Express persisted. Operators fitted chains to wheels, added booze to cooling systems, and maintained momentum. Rates fell from 35 to 15 men per fort. Yet payload transport endured. German watchers described frost-bound columns advancing through storms that had halted panzer units. The Americans had forged a supply network that operated irrespective of climate, landscape, or opposition. It lacked the polish or thrift of German ideals, but proved invincible. By May 1945, detained German supply commanders had to review Red Ball Express actions for archival purposes. Their assessments aligned completely and crushed German martial self-regard. General of Infantry Friedrich Schulz encapsulated it. The Red Ball Express embodies combat we couldn't conceive. Americans erected a fleeting society, thousands of personnel, thousands of machines, millions of tons of goods existing solely to sustain forces, then vanishing once obsolete. We erected lasting foundations across years. They assembled better provisional setups in mere days. The sharpest critique arose from General Heinz Guderian, pioneer of German tank tactics. We devised blitzkrieg yet overlooked its core flaw: supply support. Americans addressed it via manufacturing abundance we viewed as unfeasible. The Red Ball Express wasn't merely a convoy, it formed a surging torrent of resources that overwhelmed our troops. The Red Ball Express incurred about $100 million for the United States in 1944, covering wrecked vehicles, burned fuel, ruined roadways, and French compensation claims. German planners used to handling shortages deemed the sum baffling, but Americans saw it as a bargain. The effort facilitated the seizure of 400,000 German personnel, the freeing of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and trimmed the war by roughly 6 months. Each day of fighting cost the U.S. $250 million. Thus, the Red Ball Express recouped its expense in just 1 day of abbreviated hostilities. Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, who oversaw supply operations in the European campaign, a commander, remarked, "We expended 5,000 trucks and 23,000 personnel to dismantle the German forces in France. In earlier conflicts, such casualties would spell disaster. But in the context of U.S. industrial warfare, they represent tolerable costs." One unforeseen outcome of the Red Ball Express was its profound influence on post-war civilian supply chains. Countless drivers came back to the United States equipped with skills from managing the planet's biggest transport system. These former soldiers launched hauling firms, planned national highway networks, and shaped today's U.S. logistics sector. Businesses such as Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways emerged from Red Ball veterans who adapted wartime supply strategies to everyday business. From their time in France, they grasped that sheer quantity trumps precision, velocity surpasses flawlessness, and maintaining non-stop truck movement enables global dominance. Experts in military history all agree that the Red Ball Express stood as the pivotal supply effort in the European theater. Absent it, Patton'S push would halt, Paris's liberation would delay by weeks, and German troops would fortify strong winter positions. The mission confirmed the U.S. Armed Forces approach, prioritizing supplies above battlefield maneuvers. Whereas German leaders pored over Clausewitz and tactical shifts, Americans focused on Detroit's production lines and rail schedules. The Red Ball Express proved that in contemporary combat, sustaining frontline provisions outweighs strategic genius in securing triumph. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Reunet, the top German leader in the West, got detailed reports about the Red Ball Express. After poring over the documents for hours, he called in his aides. "Gentlemen," he declared, "we confront a challenge no conventional tactics can counter. The Americans have built a provisioning setup that erases geographical barriers. Our plans relied on their forces stretching beyond their support lines. That limitation simply doesn't apply. They've transformed the nature of battle, and we're stuck in outdated methods." His logistics chief, Obus Hanspedel, proposed disrupting the Red Ball paths using the surviving Luftwaffe. Von Reunet's reply showed his full grasp of the situation. "With what resources do we disrupt them? They command 6,000 trucks. Even if we could eliminate 1,000, which we can't, they'd replenish them within 7 days. To keep pace with their output, we'd have to take out 200 vehicles each day. We lack even 200 planes altogether." Beyond the figures lay personal accounts that exposed the American spirit to German eyes. Drivers enduring 3 sleepless days who turned down brakes fearing their rigs wouldn't complete the run. Repair crews toiling in icy downpours to ensure the columns kept moving. Youngsters falsifying their ages to handle the vehicles. Tales like these proliferated during the effort, forging a legend that sapped German morale. Far from the pampered foes depicted in their propaganda, Americans pushed themselves more relentlessly than Germans spurred their animals. Yet they did so out of choice, not coercion. This voluntary grit rendered them far more formidable than German theories had anticipated. The Red Ball Express unwittingly served as propaganda stronger than any deliberate campaign. At night, German troops could hear the ceaseless rumble of engines in unending columns that paused for nothing. That noise alone waged mental warfare. Frontline reports mentioned illusory convoys that disheartened soldiers as much as the real supply flow. Realizing Americans enjoyed boundless resources while Germans scrimped on final shells bred a hopelessness that eroded their fighting spirit. U.S. PSYOPs teams noted this effect and started piping truck motor noises toward enemy positions even without active hauls nearby. German outposts mistook these fake sounds for genuine ones, underscoring the mental toll the Red Ball Express exacted. By November 1944, as rail routes regained some functionality, the Red Ball Express formally ended. Yet its techniques forever altered military provisioning. The idea of relentless high-capacity, extravagant yet successful resupply entered core U.S. doctrine. Its closing phase brought one last breakthrough: the rapid teardown. The enormous undertaking, 23,000 troops, 6,000 machines, countless bases, vanished in just 72 hours. Personnel redeployed, equipment reallocated, paths handed back for public use. In contrast, Germans took months to assemble lesser endeavors and years to wind them down. Americans erected what was required, employed it, scrapped it, and devised superior alternatives. As German high command yielded in May 1945, numerous officers pointed to the Red Ball Express as proof of resistance's futility. General der Panzertrooper Hasse von Mantoyel, during his questioning, said, "Once we comprehended your supply prowess, defeat became inevitable. You could sustain forces quicker than we could neutralize them. The Red Ball Express was an armory we couldn't counter." Field Marshal Albert Kessler, one of Germany's sharpest tacticians, faced the question of what would astonish the Germans regarding U.S. military power wasn't their armored divisions or aircraft, but rather their transport vehicles. His response highlighted this truth. It wasn't the tanks or planes, but the trucks that revealed how America had fully integrated its civilian manufacturing into the war machine. We weren't battling merely your troops, we were up against your entire industrial output. The remarkable figures from the Red Ball Express underscore the essence of America's factory-driven combat approach. It transported a staggering 193 tons of supplies overall, spanning 122 million ton-miles. An average of 5,958 trucks operated each day, peaking at 7th, with a total of 23,000 drivers participating over 82 days of service. The effort burned through 57 million gallons of fuel, exhausted 180,000 tires, and lost more than 5,000 vehicles to damage. The whole endeavor cost $100 million, enabling the defeat of 47 German divisions via superior provisioning and likely cutting the war short by 180 days. These figures narrate a tale that went far beyond battlefield tactics. They mark the turning point in warfare, where manufacturing prowess outshone battlefield cunning, where supply lines dictated overall plans instead of merely supporting them. During the 50th anniversary of D-Day, in 1894, the U.S. Postal Service unveiled a special stamp at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C., to celebrate the Red Ball Express. The event paid tribute to this vital effort, often eclipsed by frontline clashes, yet just as crucial to the Allies' triumph. Attending veterans shared their deep sense of accomplishment in a mission that showcased U.S. manufacturing strength and personal resolve, triumphing over every challenge. They pushed on despite fatigue, breakdowns, and conditions that halted even the heaviest tanks. Predominantly African-American troops, they faced segregation, prejudice, and wartime obscurity, yet they secured success at speeds of 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express illustrated that in contemporary conflict, supply chains aren't mere backups, they form the core of the campaign. This initiative revealed how a democratic industrial system could harness assets in ways that authoritarian precision simply couldn't rival. German commanders who once mocked U.S. supply methods fell silent amid 6,000 rigs hauling 12,500 tons per day over 700 miles of freed French territory. They had expected Americans to adhere to traditional European restraint, hoarding supplies and progressing slowly. But instead, the U.S. unleashed a flood of logistics that submerged enemy units in overwhelming Allied resources. The triumph stemmed not from strategic mastery, but from traits the Germans could never grasp: overabundant production, technical savvy, adaptive ingenuity, and above all, the autonomy of troops who acted decisively, choices that in the Wehrmacht would demand approval from the highest ranks. In his post-war writings, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army reaped the greatest rewards from the Red Ball Express, offered the highest praise. Those truck operators in the Red Ball Express merit equal acclaim for toppling Germany as any fighting outfit. They powered through weariness, equipment malfunctions, and storms that immobilized tanks. Absent their efforts, the Third Army stays put. Without advance, victory slips away. Mostly black servicemen facing isolation, bias, and erasure from honors, they still clinch the conflict as decisively as any infantryman. Let history enshrine this fact. That acknowledgement serves as the enduring legacy of the Red Ball Express. Some 23,000 drivers, largely African-American, managing 6,000 vehicles on a dedicated route to triumph, accomplished feats that German doctrine deemed unattainable. They provisioned forward units at paces defying natural limits, sustained momentum past mortal limits, and showed that in today's battles, the force with superior haulage outpaces the one with superior maneuvers. Those German leaders had ridiculed American supply chains as extravagant, chaotic, and unsustainable. 82 days on, they capitulated to forces nourished by the Red Ball Express, at last realizing that U.S. transports had bested their panzers, that sheer output had crushed tactical superiority, and that provisioning had evolved into the guiding force of war. The Red Ball Express wrapped up on November 16, 1944, yet its lessons reverberate across military annals. It established that in an era of mass production, success favors not the boldest warriors or sharpest minds, but the country that ships the greatest volume of goods with the utmost speed over the longest stretches. The same German officers who scoffed at U.S. logistics in August 1944 put their names to surrender papers in May 1945, vanquished by 23,000 haulers who transformed combat at 35 miles per hour. Their narrative claims a vital spot in the annals of great campaigns, not for grace or thrift as it embodied neither, but for its raw effectiveness. The Red Ball Express propelled Patton'S forces onward, forced the Germans into constant withdrawal, and affirmed that in contemporary strife, a fleet of supply trucks outweighs a parade of battle tanks. France's roadways still carry the marks of the Red Ball Express, grooves carved by burdened haulers, makeshift bridge fixes, and verges strewn with discarded wrecks. Yet, the truest tribute to the operation. The pace of the Allies' triumph hinged on swift resolution. Each day the conflict was curtailed, preserved countless lives. The Red Ball Express accelerated that timeline by several months. Ultimately, those German commanders who had mocked U.S. supply chains absorbed the toughest insight of contemporary combat. Novices debate maneuvers, experts discuss supply lines, and the Americans emphasize vehicles. The Red Ball Express represented the U.S. proclaiming this with thunderous force amid the relentless din of 6,000 motors, ferrying freedom and devastation along a single-direction path to success at 35 mm. The final remark comes from an unnamed German officer recalled by a Red Ball operator during the 1994 tribute. Positioned near a Belgian thoroughfare, observing the ceaseless stream of U.S. vehicles, he remarked in broken English to his prisoners, "We anticipated it all. Your armored units, your aircraft, your vessels. We never accounted for your transports. How does one overcome a foe whose vehicles outnumber your troops?" The response thundered by every 5 minutes, piloted by weary Americans reshaping the principles of battle, delivery by delivery. The Red Ball Express transformed supply management into battlefield doctrine, provisions into conquest, and vehicles into the pivotal arm of the European campaign. The German leaders ceased their derision once they grasped this reality, though by that point Patton had reached their thresholds, bolstered by history's premier supply endeavor.